Hi, I'm Paul Marcel. If you've been following my podcast, you know one of my recent builds was a sculpted mahogany vanity, and here are actually some panels that came from it. It may not have intentionally come from it. What it was is one night I came in and it was all laid out. This is for the top drawer section, if you know about it, and I thought, you know, I'm going to make some extra headway tonight. I got a little bit of time. So I marked it all out, cut the drawers in the wrong place. So these are the drawer fronts that are on the wrong piece. So I tried to give myself a little bit of time, and what I did is I gave myself a lot of extra work. But it worked out all right that I got to use these now to test out a product. Now, at the time when I was doing all this work, surprisingly enough, Charles Neal was following my podcast. So, you know, he knew about all this wet sanding I was going through and such. So when I went down to Tucson to help him out with some classes he was teaching down there, he turned me on to a product called Aqua Coat. Now, this Aqua Coat makes a number of different products, but this one here happens to be a clear grain filler. And what it is, it's got very much a texture like, say, a vanilla pudding or something like that. It's water-based, but even so, it does stick just fine on top of an oil-based, you know, as long as your oil-based product has been dried. Now, the way that you apply this is very much like a sandwich. What you're going to do is you're going to put a couple coats, just, you know, light coats of finish on your project, and then once that's dried, then you apply this to fill a grain, give it 20 minutes, literally, that's how long it'll take. Then you can sand it with some sort of a nice sanding pad to get rid of any of the bumps that might have been introduced by the filler. And then you go ahead and you top coat it. So you're creating a sandwich between the top coat fillers. So if you want to fill something like a medium grain wood like this mahogany, it works out really, really quickly as compared to my wet sanding version that I did. Now, what I did on these two panels is one of these was wet sanded like I did for my project, and the other one I did it instead creating this sandwich so that the end result was a nice glass smooth surface. Now, one of these is with the Aqua Clear and the other one is with the wet sanding, and I won't tell you which. Now, with me looking at these side by side, and I've seen these, you know, obviously I did huge panels and huge drawer fronts and such for my project. When I look at them side by side, I really have no way of discerning which is which, and they both have the same feel. They're glass, smooth, which is what I was looking for in my finish. And what makes it difficult for this project, if you didn't follow the podcast, is because there's so much end grain here that's been exposed on these sculpted surfaces that to wet sand it, you really got to sand a lot to get those pores filled because you've got these huge pipes in a way of grain. So with the Aqua Clear, it's very easy to just simply fill it. Now, normally with Aqua Clear, you take like a spatula, after you've got the finish on there, you put a spatula of it on there and maybe squeegee it across a few times across the grain so that you're not scooping it back out. In my case, simply because it's got so many undulations here on the surface, I took a dollop of it on the side, I put some finishing gloves on and just smeared it around in a real, very much like finger painting style to get all the parts filled. And then wiped it off. Any excess that was on there after maybe 10 minutes or so I could wipe off coarsely, and then I used these to smooth it back up. But the sanding was a lot faster than with the wet sanding, simply because you're just trying to reapply the shape. So why would this be useful for you if you're never planning on doing some boneheaded project like this? Well, what's nice about this is that, say you're making a project where you're going to have some end grain, exposed, like on a joint, something like that. For whatever reason, you've got some like that. I mean, it'll even happen on cabinets like this, or on the sides of some front door drawer sides that are as an overlay. Well, on something like that, normally the trick is that you sand up to a much higher grit. Sometimes you'll apply a little bit of shellac and sand it back so that you can keep the end grain from absorbing too much stain if you're trying to keep the color a little bit more even throughout. Well, for that, it'd be very easy to smear some of this on that end grain and not even worry about going up through so many grits. Now, in the case of my vanity, one other thing that I did is on the bottom of one of them had a curved edge, and it revealed the pithy part. Now, the pithy part I couldn't really do anything about, so I went ahead and I applied some finish, and I thought, well, I'll give this thing a try. So I smeared some of it on there, shaped it 20 minutes later, and then applied the rest of the top coat. I can't tell where it is anymore. I mean, I marked it. I put a little piece of tape on the backside so I knew where it was. But trying to find it by myself afterwards the next day, I couldn't find it. So this can even work in some very, very minor repairs like that. So in looking at the amount of labor that I did on the wet sanding, which it turns out this one here is the wet sanded one, and this one here was the Aqua Clear version of that. Bringing it a little closer for you to take a look at. So again, Aqua Clear here, wet sanded on this side here. And the amount of labor that was in the wet sanded is honestly phenomenal, and not something that you would ever want to do unless it was for yourself, right? You're not going to be able to make any profit selling something like that because you could never charge for all those hours. This definitely considerably knocked down the amount of time it took for doing this. So if I were to ever make one of those again, I would never make it with the wet sanded. I would absolutely positively do it with this product. Now, when I did this, I also happened to have a chance to try out some new hand sanding pads, and I wanted to talk about those a bit because I used them on this panel. What I did is actually, these sheets here are Mirka sheets, and I normally use these on sanding between coats of finish. If I'm getting up near the higher grits and I'm just trying to finesse some of these edges, that's what I use. The other sheets that I just recently got are these Granat sheets from Festool. Now, they released these about a year ago, but I haven't been interested in buying them because when you buy them, you would get a monstrous roll. You had to buy a single grit, and it would be like 120 sheets in this big box. I mean, it's made for cabinet shops and such, or finishing shops for automotive. So it would be a long strip of these things. Now, it turns out that one of the dealers online, toolhome.com, which is run by Tom Bellemere, what he does is he actually bothers to take 20 sheets out of this grit, 20 of the next grit, and so on, and stack them all up and sell them as sort of a variety pack of these Granat sheets. So I jumped on those to try them, and I'm really liking them. Now, this isn't to say that the Mirka doesn't work very well. In fact, I always used it before because it is so good. The one thing I did notice, though, putting them side by side, when I did my testing, what I did is, let me flip this. So the top half of this is Granat, and the bottom half of this I did the sanding with the Mirka. And same here now, Granat and then Mirka. Performance-wise, they both work the same. They both took off the finish and leveled the finish about the same speed. They both dusted the finish at the same rate. I didn't find any clogging on the paper or anything like that. One wasn't more stiff than the other one. One of the problems I've had with a different brand that I used to use before I found Mirka was that if you creased this too much, and you got a crease that showed on the front, especially at the higher grits, that crease acted like a lower grit, so you'd actually get a scratch pattern from it. I don't get that with either of these papers when I was trying it. But the one thing I did notice is that I used a new sheet of 600 for both of these tests, and they both had the same number of undulations to go through and same amount of thumbing and such. In fact, the Granat had, in this case here, had all this to do that the other did not have to do. But this Granat sheet, I can't tell which corner I used. I mean, I know it's this one here because of a kink right at the very tip here that I had on the sheet. When I took it off, that's the reason I picked it, to be able to know. Whereas this one here on the Mirka, it's actually very easy to see right up here. It looks like a lot of it looks like some of the grit is missing. Like maybe it's a little bit friable and it comes off the paper. I don't know. When you feel it, you can definitely tell when you're going from the undiscolored part to the discolored part. So I'm not sure if that's intentional, that this stuff becomes somewhat more, it loses the grit just because it's at a finer grit. I don't know if that's a design aspect of the Mirka. Certainly in use, it worked better, but my gut tells me that since I can't even tell where I used it on this Granat, it's probably got a lot longer life than the Mirka. But again, nothing wrong with Mirka, and you can get these by the sheet at Woodcraft. That's actually where I keep getting them, for 50 cents a sheet. When I picked this thing here up, not with the Systainer, but when you buy just the sheets for this large variety pack from 120 up to 800, it's 120 sheets, and it basically comes out to 30 cents a sheet. So this is perfect for me, especially like those little bracket feet I did on the no comment build, the one that was to make that little bomb box. That uses a lot of like the 120s and such to get into some fine corners. So this will be very useful for a mix like that. I'll put the link on there for it in case you're interested, because he's the only dealer that's breaking this product up so that you can buy it in something that's actually home shop friendly. Now the Systainer was something that I picked up at the same time just because, well, it works for the way I store things. That's me. So there you go, a couple different things to look at for your finishing. Certainly this is going to affect the way I'm going to do finishing. This kit, I mean, I was using Mirka, that's fine. This was here is just a different replacement that I think I'm going to like better. So that was a very nice find to find. And Charles Neal turning me onto this Aqua Coat grain filler. Thanks, Charles. That definitely will save me time if I ever were to do more sculpting like this, which I already know I will be doing. But also, even for simple things like getting that ingrain not to absorb so much extra finish, that's the key. It takes only 20 minutes and a quick swipe with sandpaper.